items. Number one is apologies, and there are a number, not surprisingly, today.
Chair Daithí Mackay and Adrian McQuillan for date.
Okay, any other members aware of any other apologies? Okay. We move on to item number 2, draft minutes of proceedings from the 17th of December. They're at pages 5 to 9 of your packs. Members content that the draft minutes are an accurate record of the proceedings? Agreed. They will therefore be published on the website. We move on to item number 3, which is matters arising, and there's a table of requests for information there from DFP, pages 11 to 14 of the packs, mainly for noting. Members content? Great. Thank you. We'll move on then to item number 4, which is performance against business plan targets from NISRA, and we have a briefing from DFP. The following documents are relevant. NISRA Balance Scorecard Quarter 3 Update, and that's at pages 15 to 21 of the pack. And I'd like to welcome the witnesses here today, Dr. Norman Craven, Registrar General and Chief Executive of NISRA, Dr. Tracy Power, Director of Analysis at NISRA, and Dr. David Marshall, Director of Sources at NISRA. So I'd ask Dr. Cavan if he would like to give an opening statement.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I think it's been some time since I've been here at the committee, and there have been a number of new members, and I think the clerk thought it might be useful if I just said a little bit about what NISRA does.
Okay, sure.
NISRA stands for the Northern Ireland Statistics and Research Agency, which was set up as a next steps agency in the mid-1990s. Prior to that, there had been various manifestations of statistical and social research work done in government. But that marked a change in the mid-1990s to a next steps agency status, in the same way that the Office for National Statistics had actually gone down that route just about a year earlier. And as an agency, we actually are slightly different from the rest of the department in that we actually have to produce separate accounts and an annual report. We have a series of targets defined by the Minister, and also other targets which are endorsed by the Minister, and we report against those at year end. And the paper that you have in front of you actually identifies both the ministerial and the Chief Executive targets endorsed by the Minister for up until the third quarter of this financial year. As regards what NISRA does, I might start first with the Registrar General, which is a statutory office bearer post. It's been in existence in Ireland since about 1844, when the General Civil Registration Service was first set up. And became the Registrar General subsequently became involved in running the census in Ireland up until partition, and then thereafter both in Northern Ireland and in the Republic of Ireland the Registrar General has continued that type of responsibility. The last census was held in 2011, where we had a population of 1.81 million people. When the next census is held, it will be determined by the First and Deputy First Minister acting jointly to decide that a census should occur. The legislation requires that an interval of at least 5 years must have elapsed since the last census before another one can be held. But from the 2011 census, we produced something of the order of about 1.7 million tables, which are freely available on the NISRA website, should you be so inclined to pursue them. They cover a vast range of information. I'm not going to detail it here, but maybe just one aspect of it which might be of interest to the committee is that the census figure of 1.81 million forms the basis for future population projections. And we're looking at, over the next number of years, up until 2022, a population increase from 1.81 up to about 1.92 million. That's an increase of around about 5%. But it will be variable between different age groups. For instance, in the over 65s, that percentage increase is going to be more of the order of 26%, and of the 85-plus-year-old age group, that group which I suppose impacts most on health service resources, the percentage increase is going to be more of the order of around 50%. Now, it's from an admittedly smaller base of around 33,000 people in 2011, rising to around about 48,000 in 2022. But you can see how census data is actually used to actually form the projections, to look at the need in public policy terms throughout the decade. The Registrar General also has responsibility, as I said, for the civil registration of births, deaths and marriages. That registration process gives people a name and identity in society. It provides proof of parentage, it provides evidence of inheritance, and it provides a facility for marriage. So there's quite a wide range of very important elements of civil society. The number of births we have in Northern Ireland to be registered each year is roughly of the order of 24,000. Number of deaths around 15,000. So there's a natural increase of around 9,000 in the population each year. And you can see how that feeds in, that basic information was collected in the registration process, feeds into the kind of mid-year estimate change that we have over the decade in terms of natural increase, plus or minus what we get from migration. And that affects then the Barnett formula in terms of the amount of resource that comes to Northern Ireland. In the registration service, when I first started this job in the 1990s, we were still in the kind of typewriter and ribbon era. We were in a partnership, and still are, in a very important partnership with the local district councils, who actually discharge the function locally. The department actually defrays the costs incurred by the local registration authorities, that monies which they require to operate the function, minus the amount of resource that they bring in from certificate sales. So there are things like, over the years, we've actually computerised, since 1997, new registrations. We've actually done a lot of work in terms of actually backdating onto computer all the registrations since 1844, such that we have them now digitally available. And we've actually gone further in actually producing a facility on the web for those interested in family history to look at historic records. And since it went up in April of last year, we've had something of the order of 1.25 million basic searches, which are free, of individuals' records on that system. That's one part of what we do. In the Department of Finance and Personnel, there are statisticians and social scientists working on a whole range of different areas. And in addition to that, there are statisticians working on employment and unemployment statistics, indicators of business activity, such as the index of production, the index of services, the index of construction. We have statisticians working on tourism statistics, statisticians working on well-being, and also on business manpower planning and absenteeism statistics in support of the central HR service that the department actually also works on. So there's a wide range within DFP. And then outside DFP, we also have statisticians which belong to the agency who are outposted in support of all the other 11 government departments. So, for instance, in health, we have statisticians working on health service activity and on waiting lists. In agriculture, we have statisticians working on the farm census, on crop acreage, livestock numbers, and farm labour. In the Department of Environment, we have people working on road safety. In Department of Justice, people working on the crime survey. So I could go on, but the list, includes basically all the functions of those various departments. So, and furthermore, in addition to that, we have some statisticians who are working out in other public bodies, such as the PSNI, working on police-recorded crime statistics, and bodies like the Cancer Registry, which is looking at survival rates for different types of cancers. So a range of statisticians and social scientists working in all parts of government and in parts of the public sector. The statistics that we're working on is not just for if you like, the production of those statistics in themselves. It's really directed more at the whole policy process. In other words, that we're trying, I suppose, to, through statistics, simplify complexity, to provide statistics which can assist policymakers and administrative colleagues in the formulation of policy, in the evaluation of that policy, and in the monitoring of it as it's going through. So it's with a purpose. As we go forward, we're going to face a number of challenges, I think. One of those is obviously going to be the resource challenge, which is going to face every department in the NICS. And we will also have a challenge in terms of the next programme for government, and assisting departments and policymakers identify targets which are measurable and can be actually assessed. As an agency, we will also have probably an additional set of targets in terms of how we can actually provide as cost effectively the service that we actually provide. We are essentially trying to provide a service akin to that provided in Whitehall to the departments there with a much smaller number of staff. So we actually have to try and pick priorities with which to deal with, and to box as clever as we can in terms of actually meeting the needs of administrative colleagues. There are things such as the exploitation of administrative data, which might save us from doing more surveys in the future that we're going to look at. There's work on well-being, which is looking at how society is progressing rather than just simple measures of GDP. And there's work that we will be doing also to try and improve the dissemination of the statistics we produce, to try and produce more information in graphical form, which is maybe easier for people to interpret, and actually to produce more commentary on the statistics we produce, which will set a broader context. So a wide variety of challenges. And all the work that we do also, we are subject to external audit in the shape of the United Kingdom Statistics Authority. This is something which arose out of legislation which came in 2007, and which Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales, as devolved administrations, also bought into. And it provides for an assessment function from this United Kingdom Statistics Authority, who will come and assess the work that we do, both in terms of our engagement with users and in terms of the statistics we produce, in terms of the quality of what we produce, and in terms of the efficiency in which we disseminate that work. And they have a power, if we have a kite mark of national statistics on the statistics, if we fail that assessment, that kite mark can be removed. So to date, we haven't had an issue of that type. And I think it's quite a good thing to have that form of external assessment, because I think it gives a measure of reassurance to policymakers and to administrative colleagues, in the sense that the work that is being done on statistics and research here is actually, both in relative terms and absolute terms, akin to the quality which is being provided in the rest of the UK. Perhaps I might end there, Chair.
Okay. So you collect statistics, I suppose, retrospectively, and to what extent do you provide interpretation of the statistics?
Well, for instance, one publication...
Or commentary, whatever.
Yes. One publication that we produce is the Registrar General's annual report, which has, an annual thing that's required by statute. It does include quite a number of statistics, but it also includes interpretive commentary on what those statistics mean. We also, in that report, actually invite an article, sometimes provided by an external academic, to actually go into more depth around, detail of mortality or fertility or migration. The most recent one, actually, though, is slightly different. It's actually in conjunction with the starting of the service to allow people to trace their family trees. We actually produced an article in this year's RG report in relation to how best to do that.
Okay. I gathered from your presentation there that you would like to or intend to become more involved in the actual interpretation and commentary on the statistics in the future.
This is something which the United Kingdom Statistics Authority assessment team have actually been, I suppose, been proselytizing a bit in terms of saying that, you know, what we want to get away from, if we can, is what they call elevator statistics. You know, this went up by 3%, that went down by 2%, you know, and try and say, well, what does that actually mean in substantive terms? And in their assessments, they're increasingly going to be looking at how well we do on that to actually facilitate retention of the various kite marks that we have.
I suppose the next step after that, you know, after gathering the statistics and commenting on them, is forecasting.
Yes.
Do you delve into that area
We
to
do.
any extent?
We mean the population projections that we produce are produced in tandem with colleagues in Scotland, England and Wales. You know, we sit down and we look at various options for what we think migration is going to do, what we think fertility is going to do, what we think the trends are in mortality, and those then inform the projections that are produced on a biannual basis. So the most recent ones are the 2012 projections, but we will be producing 2014 based projections
You
shortly.
don't stray into the area of policy, you leave the policy
I think there is
implications to others.
there's an important line that we don't cross, in the sense of, I mean, our job is to assist policy rather than to make it.
Okay, thanks very much. Can we move to the actual report? And at C1, I think it's pages 18 of members' packs, one of your targets was to achieve no less than 96% of users rating NISRA services as satisfactory. You said that you have achieved an overall result of 97%.
Yes.
Can you give us any details of the targets and how this result relates to performance in previous years?
Yes, we remain remarkably stable over the period 2011 to 2013. It's coincidentally been 97% in each of those years. We also, that's in terms of the overall service. There are subsets of information which are also collected in terms of politeness, knowledge and professionalism, and those are also in the high 90s and have been so consistently.
And
We're starting from a high base.
What's the actual process of surveying those responses?
What happens is that the various branches, as I said, there are statisticians working in all government departments and branches. What we do is we ask them who are their users, and we get a list of those, and those are then independently surveyed by the central corporate services team in terms of, so it's not the individual branches talking to their individual users, it's done central.
Right. So out of that sample, what is the response rate from them?
Don't have a response rate to hand, and I would be guessing if I was giving it to you, but I think
Two-thirds, about two-thirds.
Two-thirds?
Yeah, have a response rate. What we do is we sample the occasional users, but we survey all of the major users. So it's not as if it cover all of the major users and offer them the opportunity to feedback. So it's about two-thirds. It's something that we'd like to increase. What we want to do in the future is do more face-to-face meetings with the major users as well, so that we can encourage them to get behind the figures, even if they are satisfied, to point out how we might improve in the future.
What's the sort of ratio between the response rate from the sample to the global user figure?
Okay, so the major users will tend to have a higher response rate. The other kind of users that I'm talking about are often members of the general public that will have phoned through a query just once in the year. It's difficult for them to remember, you know, a few months later, how polite or helpful the statistician was. So the response rate for our major policy users within departments is higher.
And the major users would obviously be, first and foremost, the other government departments. Okay. Is there any scope for improving that target? For example, the response rate of 2/3. How do you assess that? Do you assess that as reasonable, very good, poor?
Well, I think it can be improved, so that's why we're wanting to try and get behind that in future years. Now, for this year, it's already too late because we're about to go out with our customer survey. But my team in corporate services is setting up a group to manage this for next year, so that we're more proactive in getting responses through, whether they're through the survey or qualitatively.
And when you ask the sample about their satisfaction or lack of satisfaction, are there gradations within that? And
Yeah.
if so, what are they?
There's a 4-point scale which allows them to say whether they're very satisfied, satisfied, dissatisfied, or very dissatisfied. If they're very dissatisfied or dissatisfied, we encourage them to expand in a text box about what the actual issues are. We also ask them if they are willing to be contacted to discuss face-to-face if they remain dissatisfied, and that we would like to clear up and learn from anything that has gone wrong during the year.
And do you have more detailed information on the breakdown of the 4 gradations?
Yes, oh, absolutely. We have all the individual responses available that we can cut whatever way we wish. We do produce a publication which allows the general public to see our customer survey results.
Okay.
So it is produced as an official statistics publication.
Okay. So what specific steps do you intend to take to improve the 2/3 response rate from the sample?
Well, as I say, the group's going to be set up, so I personally don't know what that group's going to decide, but we're going to work on that in the next year. I would say that for sure, though, we need to incorporate our results more closely to the approach that DFP generally takes. There's a little bit of a mismatch in terms of timing and some of the way the questions are asked, simply because ours has historically been a long-standing survey, and DFP have started to do this only in about the last 5 years. So there's that bit of work to do. And then, as I say, I will be encouraging the group to set up face-to-face meetings with customers. Now, I have to say that we do have a very good relationship with our customers and departments already. So heads of branches and senior statisticians in departments do that as a matter of course. It's not as if their policy people and their administrative colleagues are strangers. But what we want to do is incorporate within those meetings specifically some customer satisfaction queries and questions which can be centralised rather than just left out in the departments.
So that won't happen next year, but it will...
It won't happen now because we're about to go out with our survey for 2014, but it will happen for the 2015 customer survey.
Thank you. Can I ask you about C14, and that's on page 18 of the members' packs, maintain confidence in official statistics. You report there that there have been 3 breaches of codes of practice. Can you give us some more detail on that? For example, why this happened and what the potential impact of those breaches is or was?
Okay, do you want me to answer?
Yeah,
that?
maybe you would.
Okay, well, this is linked to the Code of Practice for Official Statistics, which Dr. Cavan mentioned is the UK Statistics Authority set of rules and regulations for us. Within that, we have a piece of legislation which permits pre-release access to statistics, but only under very certain circumstances. And that is what was breached in all 3 cases here. So it was a pre-release access and release practices issue in all 3 of the cases. The cases were in OFM, DFM in December, most recently, in DCAL in June 2014, and in DEL also in June 2014, coincidentally actually on the very same day. So we had 2 on the very same day. What the legislation says is that the access to statistics before they are made publicly available can be made up to 24 hours before publication, and the access can be to a very limited list of people. So usually we tend to brief ministers, perm secs, and any policy person who, to whom the statistics are relevant. So in all of these three cases, when we send out our statistics the day before they go on general release, there are warnings and we have talked to our policy people. Ministers are very well aware. But unfortunately, there are still some instances where there is breach of those of pre-release. What I mean by that is that the statistics are then forwarded either in error or without having been aware that there's legislation behind this process to people who aren't on the list. Once the statisticians are made aware that there has been such a breach, then we're into a process within NISRA where we have a pro forma that needs to be filled in, and the senior statisticians need to talk to the people that were responsible for forwarding any statistics, and also to make sure that those receiving the statistics did not forward on, and that they're also aware that they should delete any emails that they have received. So in all of those three cases, I mean, I can go into a lot of detail on each of them if you really wish, but that's what's happened in each of those cases.
So we could describe them as either intentional or unintentional leaks within the 24-hour limit. Is that right?
Okay, well, two of those in OFM, DFM and in DEL were errors, human error, in that one person wasn't aware of the legislation in OFM, and in DEL it was an email error, so it went to someone that shouldn't have gone to through just the simple wrong address in the email. In DCAL, the press officer had forwarded the publication to people outside of the department, and again, when it was investigated, the press officer recognised that they shouldn't have done that, and they were aware that it won't, and they were aware of their obligations, and it wouldn't happen again. So you used the word leak. I wouldn't say leak. I think some of these things are just done completely by human error.
But I said either intentional or unintentional. But in any case, is there anything realistically that NISRA can do to prevent such situations arising again?
We work very, very hard to make sure that people are aware of their obligations under the legislation. This is a statutory duty to keep the statistics within the pre-release access list. And when we fill in our breach reports, it's not for us to decide what happens. Those are forwarded to the National Statisticians Office in London. And the UK Statistics Authority Board will take a view of that at the end of the year. They look through all of the breaches. If there are any sanctions that they feel should be given, then they will do that. To date, there haven't been any sanctions in Northern Ireland because on investigation there has been no malicious intent in terms of forwarding. But this legislation has only been in place since 2009, and it has taken a while to bed in. We find that certain individuals still aren't aware of their obligations, and so it's an educational and training issue as well, both for our statisticians and our administrative colleagues.
Can I ask
Sometimes
you,
actually staff do change in private offices as well, and that then can mean that you're starting again from square one in terms of people who previously had been aware of and taken on board that, sometimes with people moving around. So it's a kind of a constant need to actually remind people of their obligations.
Mm-hmm. And can I ask you, are there categories of breaches? Are there serious, moderate, unharmful? What way are they categorized?
Well, I think breaches can be more serious and be viewed more seriously if they were, for instance, in relation to market-sensitive releases. The only market-sensitive information we have would be the unemployment statistics. But you can obviously see in Whitehall that quite a few of the publications that they would produce would be market-sensitive, things like national accounts and GDP numbers and things like that. And so if they are actually inadvertently leaked, are inadvertently issued or leaked, then the UK Statistics Authority is going to take a fairly serious view, which would involve potentially writing to the head of the department and the minister concerned. But
can I ask you, the three breaches that did occur here, Was the information in those cases marked sensitive in
No.
any of them, or
No.
none of them, right? So you intend to continue the process of training and education to reduce recurrences in the future. Why have you given this area a green status if you've had 3 breaches?
Okay. Well, the actual target is not that we shouldn't have breaches. The target is that we should fully investigate all breaches and do everything that we can to stop them reoccurring. We feel actually having breaches, particularly this early on in the bedding in of the code of practice, is not actually a bad thing. It would be natural to have some breaches when we change the process so radically. Before 2009, ministers and others were allowed up to 5 days to consider the statistics. So we don't feel that the reporting of breaches is in itself necessarily a negative thing, in that it shows that the process is working and that these are being picked up. So it's been assessed as green because we do investigate fully every breach that's reported to us.
Okay, thank you. I move now to Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your evidence so far. I want to just touch on a couple of the areas that are under that point. Just briefly, my screen went blank, whatever, but that are on your internal processes. I suppose first thing I want to pick up page 20 of our packs, but it's sort of Roman numeral 8 properties. So appropriately enough, properties. We provide the properties division with accommodation specification.
Oh, yes.
And obviously this is in preparation for moves from Macaulay House, Oxford House and Netherley. I suppose just maybe it might be useful to give us a little bit of background, really, because there's not a great deal of detail there in terms of, from your point of view, the rationale for any move, what's been considered, I suppose, sort of the cost benefit side, because it maybe seems a little bit strange that we're looking at a time whenever I suppose there's a lot of financial constraints that a move's being considered, whether that's to accommodate sort of a more efficient financial position, or I wonder if you could just give us some more detail.
Okay. Well, as you say, the agency is located, and the DFP part of the agency is located in these 3 buildings currently. The Netherly people actually, in some ways, are still there because a number of years ago, responsibility for the economic statistics was a responsibility of DETI. That changed by a transfer of functions order to become a responsibility of NISRA and the Department of Finance a number of years ago. We had hoped to then to maybe have moved before now, and that those people would have come physically to be alongside the main part of the DFP cadre of statisticians. That hasn't happened to date, so they are still in Netherly, which is a government-owned building. The 2 other buildings, Macaulay House, which is the old Anderson Macaulay department store, if you know it, the upper floors of it, in Castle Street, is a leased building, as is Oxford House in Chichester Street, which is the headquarters of the General Register Office. In looking at rationalising the government estate, Properties Division within DFP have been looking to, when leases come up, look at alternatives which might be cheaper for the public purse to bear. So we have a situation with the relocation of the Land and Property Services, which is also in DFP, which has meant that Colby House, which you may know is on the Stranmillis Road, was the Ordnance Survey headquarters, as was. Is now no longer required by Land and Property Services Division. So it makes sense to, whenever the leases on Macaulay House and Oxford House run out, to use this empty government-owned building.
Presume, therefore, in terms of the spirit of rationalisation, if we're looking at what is efficient from a broader government point of view, in terms of, and I appreciate you provide the specification to Properties Division, are they specifically then looking for pre-existing government office space which isn't being used, as opposed to precluded from the thing of looking for new office space in the sense of anything additional from the government point of view?
I think what would happen is that Colby House, which is quite a compartmentalised
Yeah.
building as it stands, would need to be brought up to Workplace 2010 standards, so there would be a certain amount of refurbishment of that.
Well, I understand that. I mean, I think just the issue to some extent is if this is helping as part of the process to perhaps release unnecessary property that is being leased and ease the burden on that side of it. But if you like, it's looking at what the existing government stock is and utilise that better, rather than simply say, well, actually, we're going to stop leasing in such and such an area. Actually, it makes sense if we bought such and such property, but it's on the basis, presumably,
Of this being a government-owned building, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. What happens now is that we're in the process of having had the architects look at that, produce a proposal. That proposal and a business case goes to supply. DFP then have to confirm its affordability, and after that then there would be a tender exercise to undertake the necessary work, and thereafter that work completed and the move take place. So we're probably looking, I think, a year or two into the future in terms of any actual move. But as I say, there are a few fences yet to be got over in terms of supply and the affordability issue.
I suppose just following on then the other issues I want to touch on, which is the next item on your report, which is the sickness absence target.
Yeah.
And I suppose, looking at this from a quantitative and qualitative point of view, on the qualitative side, you're obviously given some details of the particular measures that you're putting in place, but in terms of the issue of compliance and indeed measures to address non-compliance, I wonder if you could give us a little bit more detail on that.
Well, in terms of sickness absence, I think we're running at the moment at around, I think it's 3.2 days at end of November. I think we have a target of 6.2. So at this stage, we're kind of fingers crossed that we might make it.
Now, whenever you say 3.2, is that
3.2 on average number of days up until the end of November.
Okay.
Lost through the sickness target
so
is
that would
by
be
the end of the year.
they'll link it
Yes.
month by month.
Month by month.
It does seem to be like one maybe slight degree of criticism I would make on a report, which by definition is representing sort of statistics agency. The fact that you've given a responsive green light on a particular target without then appearing to use any statistics seems a little bit. I'm sure the irony will not be lost on you in that regard. But you know, you talk. It gives an entirely qualitative response
Yeah.
to what you're doing
Yeah.
without giving any indication. You're given a green light without giving any indication that, you know, at present on track to meet this because we're at such and such statistic by such and such date type of thing.
I take your point.
Okay. Right. And what about in terms of areas of dealing with non-compliance, sort of what we...
Sorry, in what respect?
Well, I mean, you've got presumably measures to try to ensure attendance
Yes.
policy. Now, clearly, that can be tackled in a number of ways. One of which is, you know, specifically where you're getting people perhaps not complying with it. You know, where you think it can be cut down in terms of actions potentially either against staff, maybe against staff, but you know, to help facilitate staff. You know, what's
Well, in this respect, we're doing very much the same as the rest of DFP.
Yeah.
Whenever someone is absent, there's a requirement on that person to contact their line manager. It's not leaving a message for their line manager, it's contacting their line manager to say that they are absent from work and for what purpose or for what reason. As in the rest of the department, we are actually moving more to a situation where the management of that attendance and getting the person back to work is actually more being laid on the shoulders of line management to keep that contact up with the individual to try to ensure that they will return. In a case where there's a stress-related issue, there's an immediate referral to occupational health on that aspect. So I think that process of involving line management more has been good. In our particular case, we've seen a decrease both in the numbers of people compared to last year who have been off on long-term sick, And those who have been off on long-term sick, i.e. over 2 weeks, can't remember, is that the length of their absence has decreased. So it's hard to extrapolate from just 1 year's data in that respect, but I think the processes give cause for optimism in terms of that we're perhaps doing the right things and how we actually engage with people.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Paul.
Thank you. Concerns always whenever people set targets that they're not having an underspend of less than 2.5%. I think that was really, sometimes it's seen as a target. Spend your money, and as long as you don't come within that level. Appreciate that you have said that. How are you looking about projections in relation to that figure for the end of the financial year?
Yeah, there are obviously a number of monitoring rounds as we go through the financial year, which are there to actually facilitate things which maybe at the start of the year you were in your business plan, but for one reason or another actually haven't progressed. So there's the June monitoring and then the autumn monitoring rounds, where if necessary, monies can be given up. The last time that monies can be given up, I think, was in January monitoring. So we're now, if you like, in the last stages of this. And at the minute, we are projected to come in within the 2.5%.
I quite understand that, because knowing the culture that exists, you know, that nobody likes to hand back money, not least the Northern Ireland Executive. But appreciate that there are departments who, for one reason or another, whether they need to make the spend or not, aren't too keen to hand back money, even though there are probably greater pressures or in other areas that might well be vying for that money. And we're in a time now where we're dealing with the budgets for the incoming year, and appreciate that with a statistics organisation such as your own. There are other agencies and other opportunities to generate income. How do you come about doing, from a business point of view, selling your services or gaining income from outside? And by that I mean outside the public sector.
Okay.
Because effectively, if you're selling your services to another public sector, it's just retaining money. That's my attitude.
Well, there's maybe one element of that which is probably worth noting, and I mentioned some before that we actually do provide statisticians to other parts of the public sector, you know, on occasion, just like the Cancer Registry, etc. And one of the great attractions to those bodies, which are often quite small organisations, is that they do not then have to go through the process of advertising a post and you know, the costs incurred with that. They can come to us if they so wish and ask for someone. Of course, they have to be satisfied with the service we've been providing to date, which luckily has been the case. So we can provide someone to them. That brings in income, albeit, as you say, from other parts of the public sector, but income to us nonetheless. And actually, in terms of the total expenditure of the public purse, represents a saving. Not a great saving, but a saving nonetheless. Over and above that, we are engaged in some instances with outside bodies who have resources to spend on research and statistics. The prime one probably is a body known as the Economic and Social Research Council, which is a UK-wide research funding body, and one very large project that they've been recently involved in setting up has been an administrative data research centre, one based in each of the territories of the United Kingdom, and the Northern Ireland one is a joint enterprise between Queen's University and Ulster University. We are assisting the operation of that initiative by acting as a kind of a trusted third party for the merging of data sets which would be merged in secure conditions or a particular research project, and then the information destroyed thereafter to maintain confidentiality and any potential disclosure of personal information. So it's a very, very secure environment, a very, very secure process, and one that we're working in tandem with the two universities and ESRC. This has been a £30 million initiative by ESRC. In Northern Ireland, I think it's of the order of 6 million. 3 million of that is coming to us in Israel from this external service to provide this infrastructure to allow this type of research to take place, and that is trying to.
Does whenever you draw in that money from that source, do you make a comparable reduction upon your draw from the public purse then of a comparable amount?
Not really, because what we here are doing is actually, this is a new service, a new initiative, a new way of actually trying to do research.
So you're telling me that you increase your workforce to deal with that?
We increase the workforce to deal with that. But the money is actually comes from this outside source. And that's in common throughout Scotland.
Well, I know it's totally in common. Don't you don't have to. It would not happen in many other areas. But just whenever you focus.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'm wondering about the likes of the insurance industry, which would rely heavily upon statistical information to set its tariffs, its rates and such like. Do you sell services to the likes of the private sector run primarily by insurance? Or do they not rely upon you? Do they?
They would look, I think, at our statistical data on basic population information, but they would probably employ their own actuaries to actually make those assessments. Okay. In common, saying in common a lot with the other countries of the UK, the information which is produced from a census is viewed as having being produced with taxpayers' resources, and therefore should be free at the point of delivery.
Thanks very much.
So that is free to all businesses, and I mean it's something which informs the kind of open data initiative that government is very keen on in terms of actually increasing economic growth by providing information which government holds free at the point of delivery to stimulate economic growth.
Just to come, I'll move off that line, and it's really to do with staff surveys, and I understand that there's one to take place, the results of which January of this incoming year. It doesn't necessarily coincide with what's happening in other areas. Is there any possibility that you could compile and have those staff surveys in place to relate to other surveys that are being carried out by other government agencies at a similar time? January is a peculiar time to have.
Well, in the sense we're asking people about their reaction to the service that we've actually provided in this financial year. So waiting till the end of the financial year seems logical in terms of actually getting the widest view of what we've actually done during that year.
Yeah. And how does your figure compare with other agencies? Say, for argument's sake, this figure of 75%. Well, I think actually it was actually to have at least 80% of statistics. Hang on. Oh, that was another point I wanted just to highlight. Statisticians attending seminars, like. I think to say that, well, just to meet a target, you're going to attend a seminar. Is there any evaluation made as to whether there's any benefit in some of the seminars that they have to attend, or it's just a tick box exercise to ensure that they do it?
So I think that you're talking about the 80% of statisticians participating or attending seminars or NISRA working groups.
Yes.
This is a new target this year, so we're trying this target out for the first time. The reason it got into the balanced scorecard in the first place was because we have over 2/3 of our statisticians outside of DFP. One of NISRA's kind of ways forward is to increase corporacy and to make people feel part of the centre. And so in discussion with the agency board, we felt we'd try this target so that we're encouraging people who are in other departments to take time out of their policy or departmental related work and think more widely about their professional development. And so that's why we provide a seminar series, and we also have a number of working groups that are ongoing through the year that people can elect to be part of. In terms of the evaluation of the seminars, yes, we do. We evaluate absolutely every single seminar that we have, and you probably won't believe this, but I absolutely say that it's true, that 100% of people who filled in those evaluation forms say that it's been a positive use of their time. That's one of our main questions. So I think that in itself is enough to be continuing with our seminar series. We chose not to have a conference this year. We have a conference every couple of years for finance reasons, as you were mentioning earlier. But what we do then is take our keynote speakers and turn those into seminars. We've got 2 seminars coming up that are very high-profile speakers, which we're hoping people will engage with. So that's why the target is green, in that although we'll ask in the survey if you've attended one of these events in order to monitor the target, we have our independent attendance records which show that we are at that kind of level of 80%. So in terms of whether or not it's useful, we do believe that providing these kind of training events and professional development events are good for maintaining a statistical professional staff.
Okay, thank you. I want to approach on anybody else's question to you.
Okay, Paul, thank you. Martin?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr Marshall, Dr Parr, Dr Cavan, and thank you in particular for the introduction. And you're right, I've heard the acronym NISRA many times, but I've never heard such a comprehensive description of what you do. I take it the public's main point of contact with NISRA is when they go and register a death, birth or a marriage?
Yes, I mean, it's obviously something which, you know, at some stage in our lives, you know, we were all engaged in, yes. We also do have, we do quite a few number of surveys, you know, that you will be aware, for instance, that the unemployment statistic, which quotes the labour force survey, you know, that just doesn't fall from a tree in a sense. You actually have to go out and interview people, and we have a cadre of around about 300 interviewers who are based in different parts of Northern Ireland and work for us in engaging with the public, normally in their own homes. We would send out a letter to individuals indicating in advance, you know, this survey is ongoing and we would like you to take part. There's a number if they want to contract out, but if we don't hear from the interviewer, will arrive at their door. And they're very skilled people in terms of getting responses from individuals. So our response rates are quite good compared to other parts of the UK.
Tell me, I want to just touch, it's been a while since I registered a birth or a marriage, but I travel in hope. The last time I did, the forms weren't available in Irish. Are the forms available in Irish at present?
No.
Are they available bilingually?
No.
Does the European Charter and Minority and Lesser Used Languages put any responsibility or obligation on you to provide any materials in Irish to those who wish to register a birth, death or
what we do is if there's a case for an individual coming to register an event or, for instance, participate in a marriage and they don't actually have command of English, then there is a facility for the registrar to advise us and for us to engage an interpreter to facilitate that individual.
Well, I was actually thinking more of the Irish language. I mean, you're aware of the European Charter and
yes.
Do you have any response to that? I mean, in your outworkings, do you provide any materials at all? Would there not be some obligation or duty or responsibility or under the Charter to provide some type of service to those? I'm thinking about Irish speakers in particular.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure the other services are very worthwhile, but I was, listening to a young man this morning radio saying he speaks Irish to his children. They go to Irish schools, so I'm sure he would be delighted to register that birth on an Irish language form as well. But just wondering in terms of the charter,
Yeah.
if you want to come back, you don't need to answer it now, but come back and tell me
Well,
what you're...
I'll certainly come
what you
back
do
to you
in
on
response to
that.
that.
But I think probably in common with most other parts of government, you know, it's the idea is that probably this needs to await a more general, if you like, agreement in terms of, you know, the use of other languages in official forms.
Yeah,
But I will come back to you. I'll
ask-
double check. And I know, for instance, that if someone wants to register a name, an Irish name, that's not a problem in terms of, you know, how it's registered on a certificate, you know, with the inflections.
I'll ask the Irish speakers to have no children until we get that Language Act sorted out. No, I want to ask you maybe about something more relevant to your report.
Agree with that.
You report about your training and how you assess what percentage of people have had training to deliver their business objectives. It's OP1 I, and you've this target of 80%, and I agree with Mr. Gervin, and you know 80%. I think 80% is fantastic, but why 80%? Why not 75%? Why is 80 decided that would be
Okay.
the figure? Just to finish, and then the survey's carried out in January. Is that not a bit late in the year to be asking people how they received? Is that not a bit late to say if you received the training you want? Would that be a bit earlier in the year?
Okay. Well, the 80% is very easy to explain. Last year in our survey, we had a target of 76% last year, and we achieved 78.7%. So therefore, we increased the level of our target above our achievement from last year to 80. It seems like a round number without that background information, but that's the reason why. In terms of the timing, we're actually asking people about their retrospective training during the 14-15 year. So by the time they're answering the survey, it is timely because we'll be in February. And they'll have to be thinking about what they might be having in March to include in that. In terms of planning for the next year, though, that's a different process, not related to the survey, and that's about getting people's training needs at the beginning of the year centrally, and then setting up a programme which delivers that. Last year, you'll see that I've referred to the NISRA Training and Development Report there. Last year, in 13-14, we didn't provide much of the training that people needed, mainly down to because of financial constraints. So what we've done this year in 14-15 and will carry forward to next year is that we have deliberately tried to change our approach in that we've got people who are willing to train within NISRA for free to their colleagues. So we have a very good programme of training, basically colleagues, peer training, people training each other, which has gone very well this year, which I would hope would let us hit that 80. And also we have been working with the National Statisticians Office, who provide training for free through their good practice team. So we've managed to do more training this year than we did last, and for free. So we feel that's why we've made the target amber. Now, the reason it's amber rather than green is that we are very confident, but we haven't actually got an 80% on the record books to say we hit that before. So we are stretching ourselves.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Parr. Gordon,
Okay, thank you. John, do you want to come in at this stage?
Yes, thanks, and sorry for missing the start of your presentation. And that statistically, I can tell you it was very cold in Southdown, although thankfully not a lot of snow. It's around some of the on page 17 of members pack, but BR1, and I'm going to link it in both to that and round targets generally, around the actions and how you manage and support programmes, and how do we look about improving targets and measures to make them more, at times more specific, more challenging, more measurable and timely, if you like. I'll probably link these two together in that it's round. One of probably my gripes in here is how do we make programme for government much more relevant to citizens and those outcomes? How do we make it much more measurable and measurable against outcomes rather than sometimes just seemingly our targets don't always seem to be that meaningful to people, and it's linking those two bits in for departmental targets, programme for government targets, all of that. How do you make them meaningful?
Okay. I mean, obviously, I think I was saying at the beginning of my presentation that one of the things that statisticians will be doing over the next year is trying to engage with administrative colleagues and policy colleagues in terms of actually the setting of the next programme for government. I know that there were some criticisms, I think, of not this programme for government, but the previous one, in terms of measures having been, targets having been set which aren't measurable. I suppose I kind of bang on a bit within the civil service about the fact, that when departments are setting targets, setting policies, and having that they need to have targets around what they're going to achieve, that there is a need for both the economists and the statisticians, before a policy is signed off, to know how they're going to actually measure that, how they're going to come to some conclusion as to whether there was success or not. And I think the engagement of statisticians and social scientists and economists helps that process. So I'm always saying to my senior statisticians in departments, I don't mind if you bang on the door of the policymaker and it gets shut in your face, but I do mind if you don't bang. So that's the kind of approach that we have.
Can we get, Chair, more of those linkages between the statisticians and people developing policy?
Well, I think to a large extent, one of the things that we adopted quite a number of years ago was to actually try to embed the statisticians in the different departments, rather than providing the service centrally from DFP. And I think that was a good decision in retrospect, in the sense that I think at first allayed some potential fears amongst departments, that do we want to share our secrets with DFP? That the statisticians there have proved the value of the work that they have done over the last number of years, which actually, up until our present situation in terms of resources, actually led to an increase in the number of statisticians that departments have actually been willing to fund from their own resources. So I think that process is quite well embedded now in terms of the statisticians being involved with the policymakers. I suppose I'm just trying to keep going on about it such that it stays that way.
Yeah, well, it's one of the things I like is how do you make as much of that and keep, even from a statistician's perspective, keep the targets as relevant as possible, and make sure that this is a measurable outcome and relevant to and meaningful to a wider public debate on, are we going in the right direction on this particular policy, or is it time to call time on?
I mean, one of the things that we do have is we have a number of advisory groups, statutory advisory groups, specifically on the economic statistics side. We have a statistics advisory group set up under the Employment of Trade 1988 order, and that's chaired by Philip McDonough and Richard Ramsey, various external influence in terms of economic policy and sort of commentary, and they have been sort of pressing for improvements and changes in economic statistics, but also linking into your point about the programme for government and targets relating to that. They want to try and advise or provide input into that whole process about measurement, and we're hopefully taking that to the next meeting of the Statistics Advisory Committee and bringing forward some of their policy colleagues to talk to them as well. So that will hopefully help to influence in that sphere.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. And Leslie.
Thanks very much, Chair. Again, most of the questions usually asked by this stage, but there are 2 points that occur to me. The first one actually is an OP1 again, relates to employee engagement score. It's got an amber rating at the moment. I was just wondering what the problems may be there.
Yeah.
Is there scope for making those targets more measurable? Survey response rate, or is it performance in previous years? What actually is the nature of the Amber at this stage?
I think this one again is one where Tracy was saying earlier, where we've actually achieved 78.7% last year, and we're actually increasing the target to 80. So in a case where we haven't reached 80 before, we're just being a little bit on the cautious side about whether we will actually attain it. And so that's on the training. But we talk the employment engagement score again is Amber, in the sense that last year's target was 61%. I think we're
Trying to improve
it this year again. We have 61%. I mean, if you look across government as a whole, you'll find that you have some organisations which are very high, like DFID, I think, and it's got a score of 71. Our colleagues in the Office for National Statistics in GB also have a score of 61, the same as ourselves. I mean, the DFP score is slightly lower than ours, and I think the NICS score lower again than DFP's. So we're sitting near the top, but not at the very top.
But is that simply because of the response rate?
No, that's in relation to how people actually answered a series of around about 5 questions which make up the employment engagement score, which are part of the staff satisfaction survey.
Saying it's poor answers then?
No, well, the questions ask things like, are you proud to work for the organisation? Would you recommend the organisation as a good place to work? And then when you combine those scores, you get the score from 1 to 100, which is where we are in that particular place. I mean, a general point about response rates. I mean, a response rate of 70%, if you got it for the labour force survey, you'd be saying that's good. The response rate only creates difficulties if, for instance, the people who haven't responded are different in a way from those who have responded. In other words, there's a bias that you're not picking up in your recorded answers, because the people who haven't responded are all people who would have said yes, or they're all people who would have said no, but didn't bother to answer. In the big surveys that we do, we would always investigate non-response to actually ascertain in some way, are we building in some type of bias in reporting these results in the way that we are?
Just with my warped humour, I'm just thinking there that if you do give sort of direct answers, like, for example, what you think of the organisation, you could find yourself on the voluntary redundancy list.
These are anonymous responses. The responses are anonymous.
Yeah, and there are no leaks anywhere there or anything like that. But
I have no access to those who criticise.
The other point really is the initial one about, I see that in initiating the procurement process, we're really talking about that for March.
This is for the Northern Ireland
the initial
registration service.
The processing.
Yes.
It is a green, but I'm just wondering if you can update us on the current position there with respect to procurement and any cost benefits spring from that.
Make sure I'm answering what you particularly want. This is the thing which relates to the Northern Ireland registration service.
R1,
This is a system which actually is the one that we rely on to produce certificates of births, deaths and marriages from the records that we hold. The last system we procured in 2005, and it's had one extension of its life which takes it up to 2016. We need to replace it because the software that it runs on currently is no longer supported, and when we did the business case, it came out as more expensive to actually keep this thing going as it is, and that the business case also showed that the most efficient and least cost option was to go to a new procurement. That procurement is being taken forward, we have got through the supply process, whereby supply have now agreed that the project can go forward. The department has confirmed that the resources are available, and under the framework document that the Northern Ireland Civil Service has with BT, that project is now being taken forward with BT, and initial meetings have been held to start that process going. So we're on schedule for that. We will obviously have a number of milestones as we go through the next couple of years in terms of ensuring that we get a system that by 2016 means that we can actually change our supplier and in a seamless way.
But are there any particular cost benefits with this supplier?
Well, obviously cost is a factor. BT also, under the framework agreement, undertook the work which resulted in us being able to have this family history facility running alongside our current system. That project came on time and on budget, so we have a good working relationship with the individuals concerned, and at this stage we're confident that we can move forward with them and hopefully achieve what we want to achieve.
Okay, thank you for that, Chair.
Thanks, Leslie. Just in your response to Martin there, you were saying that you have not provided any forms in Irish for registration purposes because there's been no overall agreement. I think that was the term you used. Is there any legal impediment to you providing those forms?
I think I'd have to come back to you, Chair, on that. I do know that at the time of the census that we provided forms in a number of languages for individuals to, read about the census in the language of their choice, but there weren't actually census forms in Irish provided.
I remember there was
the analogy there is the Welsh Language Act, which required in Wales for census forms to be produced in Welsh and in English. And
I remember there was sort of a certain irony attached to the census one. There was an instructory form in Irish advising you how to fill the form in English.
That's right. But anyway, it was produced for all languages. It was produced for about 25 languages at the time. And there was also one produced in Ulster Scots.
Okay. So
not in Wales.
So you will inform us about the legal position in relation to those forms. Yes. Okay. Well, thanks very much. It's not that often we have three doctors in front of us here at the committee, and it's been a useful exchange, and no doubt you'll be back again in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning. Still is morning, yes. Okay. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item number 5, and it's from fixed to flexible working, proposal for public sector bodies, and we will be having a briefing from Oma Enterprise Company Limited, and we have Dr. Nicholas O'Sheil, Alan Mitchell. Dr. O'Sheil is the Chief Executive of Oma Enterprise Company, and Alan Mitchell is the Data Analyst for the Smart Region Invest NI. So, gentlemen, you're very welcome. Can I just remind members that the relevant information is at pages 23 to 35 of the pack, and if you are minded, Dr. O'Sheil, we will welcome an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for inviting Alan and I here today. I'd also like to thank the committee, or your colleague maybe here to my left, who rang us at 8:20 this morning to see if we were travelling okay on the road. Thank you for that too. The context of this document is in relation to, I suppose, the report that your committee, this committee, produced before Christmas.
Yeah.
And we had some interaction with members before that, and it was made known to us that the committee was working on a flexible working report,
Yes.
and that would be out before Christmas. So we were delighted to see that, and then in the context of your committee's report, we had a proposal that we were working on ourselves, and we thought we'd share it with you, and that's what led to today, so we appreciate that. In relation to, I suppose, where we're coming from is that we're doing similar work in relation to the private sector at the moment, where we're talking to private sector companies about flexible working. And out of that actually came the suggestion, well, are you talking to the public sector about flexible working? And at that time we weren't. So then we started to engage with the public sector, and on foot of your report we're here today. And really where we're coming from is, I suppose, with technology, and we can see it in this room where you have cameras and the microphones and mobile phones and smartphones and whatnot. We're certainly in a changing world, and we're saying on a daily basis how people, and particularly younger people maybe, are using technology to work. And for lots of reasons then, that's breaking the link between people having to work from one specific location every day. And again, in the private sector, companies are doing this where they might have an office where they employ 300 people, but it doesn't mean that they have 300 desks anymore. They might have an average of about 180 desks, and people come and go and work flexibly. So it's a function partly of the technology that people are using, and obviously as the years go by, this will become more and more of an issue as more and more technology comes on stream and people get more used to using the technology. So we thought there was an opportunity, or we think there is an opportunity then to engage with the public sector, and your committee was an ideal body to do that, and then you wrote back to us, invited us. And really what we're saying is, I suppose, given, not least because of the large percentage of people employed in Northern Ireland in the public sector, there must be opportunities in relation to flexible working. And what we've tried to do in the document here, just in a simple way, if you like, for ourselves to understand it, is just kind of pick up on the reforms of public sector that will happen over the next number of years and over the next 10 years. And I suppose flexible working we're seeing as one of those reforms that will happen. We've identified in the document flexible working in various different ways, and we have examples already from the private sector based in Omagh, where some companies are based in Belfast and they would employ people who drive up and down every day from Omagh. So because of facility we provide, then we've been able to go either to the employer or to the individuals and say, do you know you could work from here, and instead of driving to Belfast 5 days a week in the traffic, you could either not drive any day or you could drive 3 days a week. For the company, it's very interesting, because one of the things that a number of companies are interested now is kind of staff retention, and particularly if the staff concerned have particular skills, they want to accommodate them, and they certainly don't want them to leave the company. For the individual, there's a massive benefit from a work-life balance. I mean, we have examples of people working from Omagh now who, you know, even if it's 3 days a week, are spending an hour to an hour and a half less every morning and every evening travelling, and the effect that has on them, even on their health and well-being and their family life, and just their general demeanour as well. There's also, and I mean, up to very recently, there was and still is a considerable saving in relation to petrol, diesel, oil, fuel. Okay, it's getting a little bit cheaper, but it's still a considerable cost. So there were a number of benefits there that we're seeing in reality. We've gone from a situation where, I suppose, in the enterprise company where we're based, where there might have been 1 or 2 people flexible working by default, where there's probably about half a dozen or 10 now who are doing it actively, and we're continuing to actively talk to private sector companies about doing it. So what we would love to do is to talk to the public sector through yourselves about possibilities, and in the context of what we have set up physically from a physical office space point of view, and also from a technology point of view, broadband and secure remote working is in relation to the public sector. Yeah. And obviously, again, I was just kind of repeating a little bit, but given the numbers employed in the public sector, there are massive opportunities there. It also, one thing we've learned is in the public sector, it doesn't have to be, department by department or in silos. It can be a flexible working facility based in Omagh for people who travel up and down every day. And let's say there are 50 or 100 of those people. They could be across all government departments, or they might be from 3 or 4 departments. That doesn't really matter. So it would be a facility that would be in place. What it would do, we feel, for the public sector, overheads and costs and office space and rent where you're paying it and things like that is reduce costs. And what we would do for the people is improve their quality of life and also reduce their costs as well. So the flexible working, and we can pick up on it, there are various different ways. It's not somebody kind of staying at home in their pajamas and working from home. In our context, what we're talking about is is a more structured way
or
from
the onesie.
Exactly. But in our case, and what we found work is that it's in an enterprise company. It's in a modern facility. You go into a physical location. It's a work environment. There are other businesses working from there. And really what it does, instead of driving for an hour and a half, you're driving for 5 or 10 minutes to get to your location, or maybe 20 minutes. There's an environmental issue with it as well, obviously, from the point of view, if that's a target, both from some individuals. We have a couple of people who cycle into work now in Omagh, whereas just because they want to be friendly to the environment. So again, it cuts down on that. The flexible work in itself takes various different forms, and if there are any questions on that, we can cover it. But we found in talking to private sector companies, they're comfortable with it and it works for them. Just for me to finish off by way of introduction, and then I'll ask Alan to bring us through. There are benefits, I won't go through them, but to the employers, to employees, and as we've said here, to the public sector as well. And we already have examples at the back. Again, I won't go through them in detail, but we have examples just listed at the back of private sector companies that are doing this at the moment, and how they're doing it and why they're doing it, and the benefits it has for them. So the issues that come up about managing staff, about security, about productivity and all that, we've gone through a learning curve, and we've satisfied private sector companies that no, this can work. And we feel ourselves in the next number of years, and particularly in the next 3 to 10 years in Northern Ireland, the whole issue of skills and I suppose in some areas skills shortages and organisations filling jobs will grow. So from that point of view, we've already had an incident where if somebody with the right skills goes into their employer someday and says, look, I'm leaving to go to another company, or I'm leaving whatever, that employer will really want to hang on to them. And we've had an example where if that person, for instance, was leaving a company in Belfast just because of the traffic and the commuting, they were fed up with it. Now, in that case, they were moving to another part of Northern Ireland, closer to home. That employer at that time would have done anything to hang on to them. So if the suggestion there was, well, look, I live in Omagh, I'd like to work from Omagh, all the employer would have said is, yes, that's fine, absolutely, come into the office once a week and that's grand. So that currency of skills is really driving this as well as the cost and the well-being issue and cost for employers. Now, how we've gone about this, and we've had an interesting time from the point of view, we've done some work on the background to kind of underpin this, and that work is building over the last number of months. And Alan Mitchell, who's my colleague here on this, is working in the region as a data analyst. So as well as, I suppose, the idea of this and the creativity in the idea, we've backed this up with facts and figures. Now, they're all a work in progress, and we will continue to get more facts and figures. But if I could ask Alan to cover in an introductory way too the work that he's been doing.
No problem. Thanks very much, Nick. Chair, if you don't mind, I'm just very conscious that the committee has heard this morning from 3 statisticians, and now you're hearing from a data analyst, so I'll try not to make this too dry. The figures that I'll talk through are in Appendix B of the document. I would say, I've deliberately tried to be conservative with the way I've estimated these. I didn't want to come in front of the committee or in front of anybody with sort of overhyped sensationalist data. Everything here is very level. It's very conservative. The conversation I originally had with Nick and other stakeholders in the region that sort of led to this was we could quite visually see the park and ride facilities in the Fermanagh and Omagh region being expanded, been very heavily used and expanded over the last few years. We can now say that there's 147 car parking spaces used in a large park and ride facility in Omagh, and a series of those in across the A5 network up as far as Ballagolly and then on up the line, and a similar again on the A4 channel down to Enniskillen. Was then able to use a sort of variety of live data websites, not much of which was CarShare and track people through LinkedIn and through social media as well. And I would say that what I figure I come up with, there's 250 people commuting daily from Fermanagh and Omagh to Belfast. Now, I would believe that's a very conservative estimate. The census data would suggest that it's considerably higher. And the public sector represents the largest body there, with at least 50 to 60% of those people who are commuting are working in the public sector. And I should say there, when I say public sector, actually I'm thinking of things like the Northern Ireland Civil Service. I deliberately avoided education and health, because you could sort of say immediately that those jobs probably aren't applicable for flexible working. That commute is taken, as Nick suggested, at least 2 hours each way, particularly if you're being in Belfast for 9 a.m. In the morning. And if you're taking the bus, you're probably leaving at 10 to 6, certainly no later than 6:15 in the morning. So that's having a significant impact on people's lives. When you then scale that up, you're looking at about 250,000 man-hours lost per annum. And when you apply a productivity estimate to that, you can come up with a sort of figure that's saying, well, that's at least £3.5 to £4 million lost to the Northern Ireland economy every year, just simply because people are driving up and down the road. The only, as Nick alluded to, the only people that are really benefiting from that is if you're selling petrol or diesel or tyres or car maintenance. You're going to be benefiting. And then obviously run that analysis, looking at what it would be like if you reduced that commute from 2 hours each way to half an hour each way. So again, quite conservative. The traffic was not as heavy as it is in Belfast, and certainly it could be 10, it could be 15 minutes, but in the interest of being conservative, I went for half an hour. Anything from sort of £1.5 to £2 million off that is being lost could be recaptured for the Northern Ireland economy. Obviously then there'd be good impacts on the region as well, sort of supply chain impacts and feedback down through the chain. People have a bit more money to spend, they're home earlier, maybe they go out for a meal in the evenings that maybe they couldn't do if they weren't home to 7 or 8 o'clock. So there is a wide economic impact there. Socially, it's difficult to quantify, but certainly I would say it would increase people's social engagement in their communities as well. And so just finally then, the data I have is have been able to prove that these people are going, as Nick alluded to, it's not particularly heavy in any one department. It is people across all departments, and able to track that through. When people use some of these websites to say, well, I'm travelling from such and such a park and ride in Omagh to Netherley, for example, and I can take that assumption that they're working for the Department of Enterprise. So I have there listed, just as an example, the companies or the departments people are working for as well. And then obviously Nick alluded to the environmental impact of about 5 tonnes of CO2 that's being emitted each year, simply because when people are commuting up and down that road, 55% of people are driving without a passenger. 20% driving in a shared car facility, and only 15% are using the bus. So I think there's significant evidence there to suggest that certainly economically, environmentally, socially, there's a lot of benefits to flexible working.
Okay, thanks very much. In a response to the committee's flexible working inquiry, the department told us that they are already well advanced in embracing flexible working locations. To what extent do you see this being the case, and in terms of the civil service in general, availing of your own facility? And can I ask you also how receptive DFP in particular have been to your proposals to date?
Sure, Chair, thank you. We've met, from a practical point of view, we met with the Finance Minister just before Christmas, and out of that then we spoke to a colleague in his department who made us aware of this committee's work and the flexible working in your report. Yeah. So that engagement has been there. From the point of view of, of what's happening already, I suppose where we're coming from is that we're saying, look, it's great that there's an awareness within the department and within this committee, and an ideal scenario from our point of view would be to engage with the public sector in relation to a pilot in Omagh, as it were, from this point of view, because all the logistics and resources in place. What we're doing kind of in parallel with that is we probably have about 4 to 6 people working flexibly from the centre at the moment, from private sector companies, and we're going to continue with that and build that. And our ideal scenario is that while we're doing that, or in parallel with that, that we have either a pilot or we have people working flexibly from the public sector as well, so that they go hand in hand.
Yeah. The people you have currently working in your facility from the private sector, are they working on a 9 to 5 basis over a 40-hour week, or are they dipping into sort of hub type situation?
They're pretty much the 9 to 5 now. There might be 3 days a week. So just one, probably the best one example is there's one person there who's working for a company in the Northern Ireland Science Park and lives in Omagh. So they tend to go up there 2 days a week and then work from the office in Omagh 3 days a week. Now, from their point of view, they work exactly the same in Omagh. They come into an office, they sit down at a desk, they turn on the computer, they're on their system. And at busy times they could be there 10 hours a day, but basically it's the 9 to 5, and then they would just normally work as demand requires. We also have just as another example, we have somebody who works for Oracle, the giant American corporation, and again they work from Omagh. They manage a worldwide sales team from Omagh. And about every 5 or 6 weeks he gets on a plane and goes to California, and they have these meetups and so on. But again, he comes into the office in the morning, he goes into his office, turns on everything like we all do, sits down in front of, well, in his case, it's 3 computer screens, and he's on the Oracle worldwide system. So he could be doing that in California, he could be doing that in London, he just happens to be doing it in Omagh, and he lives 3 miles out the road. And he's been doing that now for 2 years. So there are some great examples of how it works.
So, to what extent does your facility have the capacity to meet the requirements of the civil service workspace utilisation targets?
I'm not familiar with the detail of those targets, but I mean, from the point of view of a resource that's there's the physical resource as an enterprise agency. There was a new part of it built just last year, which is about 31 modern offices, completely broadband enabled. It also sits on the Project Calvin line from a broadband point of view. Right. So we literally are linked in directly with Project Calvin. And from that point of view, just from a practical point of view, be it Oracle or Microsoft or Google, could literally move into the building tomorrow, plug into the comms room and have everything they want. So there's a fantastic resource by chance partly and by design. There's a fantastic resource there for this capacity. I mean, if somebody walked in our door tomorrow from wherever and said, I would like to work from here tomorrow, can I do that? All we have to say is, yes, there's a desk, there's an office. Okay. We have at the moment, we have about 30 odd offices of the new ones that were built last year available. So we're part of our role and job at the moment is to fill those offices. We're doing it, and we will do it with private sector, but this was brought to our attention. Well, why don't you engage with the public sector as well? So for us, if we could do it with both, it would be fantastic.
I hear you mention there, the word office, in our discussions with DFP. They mentioned the fact that various departments have facilities throughout the region for what's called hot desking.
Yes.
Where people call in, do a specific piece of work over a comparatively short period of time, but are not based there on any permanent or even semi-permanent basis. Do you have the facility to accommodate that type of operation?
We do, Chair, and sorry, you're right to pick it up. I keep saying office, but yes, we have anything from the kind of different things that have come from our discussions with companies is an office where somebody wants that. A hot desk facility, so it will be an office with a number of desks in it that they might use on a drop-in basis or they might use on a regular basis. And then we have an office where there would be a number of seats, if you like, which would be what a lot of the companies in Belfast work on. So you might have a row of desks along there, so there would be a 10-seated, and so somebody would maybe use a seat in the office. So it's kind of a seat, a hot desk, which is, if you like, a corner of an office, or probably the 3 mixes and matches that we do. But essentially, we're geared up. If somebody came up with a different kind of tweak on that or a model, we're in a position where we can say yes, we can do that.
Okay. The current users of your facility, I get the impression that there's a level of contentment there with the facility amongst them. But has any independent assessment been done of their evaluation of the facilities, their estimation of how effective this facility is from the point of view of finance, travel, so on and so forth?
Well, we would do our own, just when you say there, the facility, that's just on the front of it, that kind of gives you a feeling or a picture of the facility. We do our own annual internal customer survey as an enterprise agency, but no, there hasn't been a kind of an external evaluation done. Any of the kind of cost benefit we've done has been on Alan's work, which is kind of nearly from a promotion and a selling mode. But I mean, certainly as time goes on and as we fill up the building, we would embrace something like that. We'd have no difficulty.
Yeah. I was listening to the detail that Alan had amassed there, from the point of view of travel and time saved and so on and so forth. How feasible would it be to produce hard figures in relation to the potential savings there might be for the public sector if they were to utilise your facilities?
Well, we're doing, and Alan can answer this as well, we're doing it based on the numbers, the kind of research we've done and the numbers we estimate are travelling up and down every day, and using that then and kind of applying mathematics to that, if it's one person driving 2 hours and so on and so forth. Certainly if we had maybe more engagement with yourselves or with the public sector or with some statisticians, we could tease it out more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The analysis I've done so far, Chair, has been using sort of publicly available information. We were sort of talking about savings within a department or within the civil service. I think you would require their sort of data that they would hold internally that wouldn't be publicly available, such as cost per seat and what metre squared could be saved from headquarters in Belfast by working remotely. So I certainly have no problem in engaging with them, further down the line, to do that analysis.
Okay, and Alan, you're based there as data analyst for the Smart Region on behalf of InvestNI. What's your own assessment of the costs and benefits both to yourself and to your employer, InvestNI? Have you been there?
Yeah, well, certainly I'm employed by InvestNI. The Smart Region is funded through EU funding and it's administered by InvestNI. So I am, a fully fledged InvestNI employee, if you like, and I'm based in the Enterprise Centre.
Presumably you live in Omagh?
Yes, in the region, yes. Obviously I'm based out there. There's no reason for me to need to be even in the InvestNI's Western office in Omagh. I'm based out in the Enterprise Centre. I've engaged with the IT team, if you like. I've got facilities to get straight onto the direct InvestNI system from the Enterprise Centre. Yeah. To me, when I engage with the guys that are working in the enterprise company, we're all the same. I can see guys around the table with a laptop. Our work's on our laptop. If you can plug into the internet, you can go. You all go if you plug into the internet and you've got a phone. So to me, there's no reason for people to be driving up and down the road, maybe getting into work at 9, half 9, tired, exhausted, maybe not being as productive as they could be. Take, for example, the snow we've had in the last couple of days. If you're sitting in Belfast and you've got a 2-hour commute home, the minute it starts to snow, your mind wanders onto, will I be able to get home? Whereas, I'm sitting in Omagh and it's not an issue because home's a few miles down the road. So my assessment is it's definitely a way of saving the public sector money.
Okay. I could just ask you a final question. Do you provide a type of hub facility within the centre where, small, like say 1 or 2 person companies who wouldn't have the finance to perhaps run a full-time office, where they can use your facilities to perform whatever IT type tasks they need to, and
yes, yeah.
How is that charged to them?
Yeah, we do, Chair. We provide, as an enterprise company, we provide anything from, writing a letter, answering the phone for somebody, taking messages, doing a business plan, and all that's there. Yeah. And anybody who's thinking of starting a business can come in and chat to us and look for advice, or starting a business then can dip in and out of that. And it's literally from using us to come in and out and maybe book a room to have a meeting before they start up, to take a corner of an office to get us to do work for them. And that's just all part of our kind of normal process. This has come out of this, where we saw a need for this, and we invested in, some European money and some of our own money, and we put up a £2 million building, which is the picture of there. And we're trying to target that that specifically it is kind of state-of-the-art building, but in a practical way. And we one of the reasons for doing that was that we had the link with Project Calvin. So we saw that this literally the best infrastructure in the world runs around Northern Ireland. As it happened, we were lucky enough in Omagh, it ran through Omagh, ran through our building. We have Hibernian Atlantic, who are the people who laid the cable or took the splice off the cable and brought it in as a tenant. So we were able to break into their comms room. So because we were, if you like, sitting on that gold mine, as it were, we said, how can we best use this? And this is our attempt to do that and to reach out. And as I say, just to reach out, we're currently talking to quite a number of companies in Belfast, and we're saying to them, with the good work that Alan is doing, we're saying, did you know that you have 25 people driving up from the Omagh area every day? And did you know they're highly skilled? And did you know at some point they'll probably get tired up of that and maybe go and work for somebody else?
If there was, let's say, a run on your facilities from the civil service, how many people could you accommodate there?
Where we have now, we literally have emptied at the moment. But there's 80,000 square feet the enterprise company consists of at the moment, and there are about 300 people work from there at the moment. And there's room currently. We have empty space, if you like, from the new building for about another 150. And we would see that filling up over the next year and a half. But there are other opportunities with Omagh, and within the Omagh context and within the Omagh Enterprise Company, if we went back like in 6 months and said this is full and we have more demand, we would do another extension or we would put up another building. And in our minds over the next 3 to 5 years, this is what we would like to do. We'd like to in the next year fill up the current building, and then we'd like to put the pressure on ourselves, if you like, and Omagh generally, and say we need to do another building. Now, as things stand at the moment, there just happens to be an empty private sector building directly across the road from us, which would take about 400 people, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay. Any other members? Martin?
Well, just quickly, Deputy Chair, I want to thank you, Mr. O'Sheill and Mr. Mitchell, for coming down. The Omagh Enterprise Centre has a very good reputation, even as far as Belfast. We're wondering, could you hold some of the Tyrone MLAs there? Might give us a little break. You would hold them, let them work from Omagh.
It's terrible to say about Barry.
No, but I do want to, Mr. Marcus Isherwood is particularly well known in this city and does great work. I think it's a great idea. I'm glad you're tied into Hibernia Atlantic. A lot of money spent in that. I think it's totally underutilised. The Finance Minister, Mr. Hamilton, and the Economy Minister, Ms. Foster, are bringing in a new corporation tax regime. It should lead to a bounty for those who have really good access to broadband, and the best broadband in the world in terms of Kelvin. So I hope that not only, I know you need to fill what you have, and I know you have another space beside you, but I hope you're planning for that. I think we're into a new era, a completely new era of job creation between now and 2020. So if you can keep on that good work, and if we can play any part in it by having some public sector people based there, I think it would be win-win. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I just mention, because you're right, Marcus Isherwood, who was to be with us today, and he just couldn't make it. He had a difficulty just yesterday. So, but just to acknowledge, because he is part of the team very much so. And Marcus is a board member of the Enterprise Company and has been a great supporter and driver of this. And I think, just to take your point, we would hope to, with corporation tax and with the number of companies going into Belfast, because we are saying to Invest in Alistair Hamilton directly and Arlene Foster, we're saying, look, great job on bringing all the jobs into Belfast, because everybody gives out about Belfast. We're actually saying, great job, keep bringing them into Belfast, but look, will you make introductions for us to go and talk to those companies? And just before Christmas and in January now, we've met 3 or 4 of them, and we would hope to spend all of 2015 meeting 2 or 3 of those companies a month to get, and through Alan's work, identify the employees they have from the area. And the ideal scenario for us is to do a similar parallel work with the public sector. So if I could maybe even just pick up, Martine, I know, and I hope I'm referring to you correctly from the point of view. But again, if there were one thing that would be hugely beneficial for us is any introductions that could be made to companies, to business people. It doesn't, from our point of view, it doesn't have to be the public sector. We would love it to be the public sector and engage. But particularly even from your point of view, because I do follow you on Twitter and I know how active you are with the businesses, and we'd be delighted with any introductions.
I'm now following the Omagh Enterprise Centre on Twitter. from 5 minutes ago.
And if you wouldn't mind to Nick_OEC, because I do it as well, and we actually brought you a little present, Chair, if we could give to you at the end, but we'll do that at the end.
Any other members would like to ask a question? Okay, well, gentlemen, thanks very much for attending today. It was a very interesting presentation, and certainly innovative, and looking to the future. And the committee will, in due course, consider your presentation and decide on what action is appropriate after that. So, thank you both very much.
Thank you, and thanks to all the members. Chair, could we just leave with you, and we'll give it to your colleague here, if we could just leave with you. One of the things when you mentioned about Twitter there, and one of the areas that has brought this forward is just embracing technology, and be it Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, and Alan has done some really interesting work on LinkedIn, and because that's where we identify the people, we're actually able now to identify who's in Omagh, who's driving out of Omagh, where they're going, what skills they have, who they're working for, when they're likely to move, and so on, and we're doing that. But we do a weekly blog as well on kind of all things enterprise and technology, and one of the things we did last year to coincide with the new building was we put them into a booklet form. So if we could leave a copy of that with each of you, just for information and a bit of marketing.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, members. If members are in agreement, proposal is to send the Omagh Enterprise proposal to DFP for a formal response on the general concept of the civil service making use out of such facilities. Members agreed with that?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. Members agreed with a specific proposal in relation to a pilot scheme.
Who would actually be doing that, Chair?
Well, presumably Omagh.
In what area then?
Well, in relation to civil service.
Anywhere in the civil service?
I think it might be slightly jumping the gun less with a bit more detail, but would it be worthwhile if we're forwarding the stuff to DFP to ask what their opinion on a pilot scheme would be? Put it that way, rather. I'm a little bit. I would be a little bit reluctant simply to tie in the pilot scheme without sort of being properly scoped out.
Members content with that modification to the proposal? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on then to item number 6, which is subordinate legislation, and the first one is SL1, the Public Service Pensions Employer Cost Cap Regulations, and that's at pages 36 to 42 of your pack. The purpose of the proposed statutory rule is to provide a legal framework for common standards for cost control processes in public service pension schemes. These schemes will be established by the 1st of April 2015 under the Public Service Pensions Act NI 2014. DFP officials have stated that this common approach for cost control processes was recommended by the Independent Public Service Pension Commission, that is the Hutton Review. The Department states that it is designed to aid transparency and effective oversight of public service schemes and to help ensure a fair balance of risk between scheme members and the taxpayer is maintained across schemes for the future. The rule will be subject to negative resolution. And can I ask now if members have any queries or concerns with the proposals? If so, DFP officials are prepared to provide an urgent response ahead of the committee's formal consideration of the statutory rule. So, when I take it that members have no queries or concerns, in that case, I'll put the question that the committee has considered the DFP's proposal for subordinate legislation under the Public Service Pensions Employer Cost Cap Regulations Northern Ireland 2014 and has no objection to the policy implications of the proposed legislation at this stage. Members agreed? Agreed. Okay, well, I move on then to the statutory rule, the rate, temporary rebate amendment order, Northern Ireland 2014. That's at pages 43 to 46 of the pack. And the purpose of the proposed statutory rule in this case is to provide for an extension to the empty retail premises rates rebate until the 31st of March 2016. The rule will be subject to affirmative resolution. So can I advise members if they have any queries or require further information about the proposed rule? Departmental officials are on standby in the public gallery and will come forward to address queries. Can I ask, do members have any queries?
That seems quite sensible.
Extension existing.
No queries. In that case, if members are content, I shall put the question that the committee has considered DFP's proposal for subordinate legislation under the Rate Temporary Rebate Amendment Order for Northern Ireland 2014 and has no objection to the policy implications of the proposed legislation at this stage. Members in agreement? Agreed. We'll move on then to the rates exemption for automatic telling machines in rural areas order Northern Ireland 2014. That's at pages 47 to 15 of members' packs. The purpose of the proposed statutory rule is to extend the current rates exemption for any automatic telling machines, ATMs, that is assessed separately for rating purposes in a designated rural area. ATMs located in banks or building societies tend to be valued as part of the property and so are therefore not affected. The rule will be subject to affirmative resolution. Do members have any questions?
I do have. What designation of a rural area are we using? Are we using the Department of Agriculture's designation, Department of the Department of Environment's designation, or whose? Because there are a number of designations of rural areas which are deemed by, and I use, I'm thinking in relation to the LAGs, which the Department of Agriculture is responsible for delivery of European money through. Their definition of a rural area is totally different from what the DOE designates as a rural area. What does DFP see as a designated rural area?
Okay, we have Andrew McAvoy here. Andrew's from the Rating Policy Division of DFP. Very welcome. Andrew, you heard the question there.
Yes, I mean, at the moment they use the NISRA designation that's applied to either rural, urban or mixed wards, and that's been the case since the scheme came into place. So NISRA are updating those designations as we speak because of the new council boundaries, but that's what we use to determine what a road is, you know, what falls within the scheme.
That's fine, I'm okay with that.
Okay, content?
Yeah, Chair, can I just a quick question? I have some confusion in my mind about the designation of these machines. Some are part of existing hereditaments and are therefore valued as part of the whole hereditament.
That's correct, yes.
Others are separate. Now, separate in the sense that they may be attached to the like of a village shop.
Yeah, they could be standalone machines.
When you say standalone, though, is it part of some other building, or?
Well, you can have a standalone machine, or you can have, you know, a hole in the wall that's part of a building. It all depends on how they're valued by the professional valuers in LPS. But essentially, where they're not valued as part of another hereditament, that's what falls within the scheme.
Well, how does that differ then between the urban and rural scenario?
Well, the purpose of the scheme is actually to provide, to sustain those rural ATMs that are standalone within rural areas. It's to deal with cash flow and things like that, people's access to money within those.
So it's not, all the urban ones have to pay rates then, do they?
Yes, there's full charge on them.
I presume, Chair, basically thinking is that if it's in an urban area, there's probably a reasonable amount of usage and the banks are unlikely to remove those. I suppose part of it is, you know, we've seen unfortunately a lot of areas.
It's basically the purpose of
from that, but And to some extent, this is to ensure there's at least some level of proper service given to
Essentially what the
It wouldn't be
banks...
It's
probably seeing
basically
that
to
really.
encourage the banking companies or the machine companies to locate in
They have actually said
rural areas.
it wouldn't actively encourage them to put an ATM in a rural area, but it would allow them to sustain an ATM that is already there.
Right, okay.
But for the scheme, they may have removed it. So there's about 60 ATMs, I think, in Northern Ireland that
So it therefore helps the like of those banks who are closing their branches in rural areas. There's a saving of £2,200 per ATM.
it would help the ATMs that are there existing.
Interesting point, isn't it?
It's
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Just
But I mean, my experience of them, the ATMs in shops in rural areas, quite often they are provided by ATM providers who are not banks.
That's correct.
Now the holes in the wall, or the holes in the walls, whatever the plural is, they're more likely to be provided by one of the big banks.
But there's nothing to stop the banks doing that, Chair. I mean,
No,
I know
there's
there are
nothing to stop
banks
them.
like that. They have a hole in the wall.
And no branch.
I'm just,
branch.
Sure, I'm just interested to find out, most, and I'm thinking in particular of one in my own area, where there's a fairly good business running through a petrol station, and they have a standalone ATM inside the petrol station, which is just, as you've already alluded to, Leslie, it's one of the small boxes which is not owned by a bank. It seems to be an independent, no charge for the use of it. But my understanding, and I know Mr. Johnson very well, would be that he is currently paying rates on the whole shop. I'm probably unaware that he should be getting some exemption for probably about a 4 foot square area where the ATM is.
Well, I think it depends on just the exact circumstances. As I say, valuation officers in LPS are very aware of how they demark those valuations, and as I say,
But the exemption would go to the shop owner, presumably.
it's the person who's responsible basically for the standard rates for the ATM. So it just depends who's deemed to be the occupier of that property. As I say, it
Right,
could
okay,
change and
fair enough.
It goes to the occupier, whoever's responsible for
whoever's
the
responsible for the ATM.
ATM, not the related business.
It's whoever LPS would have assessed as responsible for the payment of the rates in that.
Oh, the rate payer.
Yeah,
Right.
rate payer. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So that would usually be the owner occupier.
Yep.
Okay. Any further questions?
No.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. In that case, if there are no further questions, I'll put the main question, that the committee has considered DFP's proposal for subordinate legislation under the rates exemption for automatic telling machines in rural areas, Order Northern Ireland 2014, is a bit of a mouthful that, and has no objection to the policy implications of the proposed legislation at this stage. Are members in agreement?
Yep.
Thank you. Agreed. We move on then to the rates, making and levying of different rates regulations, Northern Ireland 2015. That's at page 50, or pages 52 to 54 of the pack. The purpose of the proposed statutory rule is to enable different district rates to be made and levied on premises, one for all non-domestic properties assessed on a net annual value basis, and one for domestic properties assessed on a capital value basis. It also sets out the new conversion factors needed for the striking of the district rates for 2015-16 due to the reorganisation of local government and the non-domestic revaluation. DFP officials have stated that the mechanism is not a new policy. It merely allows councils to make the one decision around the setting of the district rate for domestic and non-domestic ratepayers. Conversion factors have traditionally recalculated and reset every time there is general revaluation, but are also required for next year as a result of the local government reform, and the rule will be subject to a negative resolution. If members have any queries, Andrew is still at the table. Do members have any questions or queries on that? No questions, thank you. In that case, if members are content, I will put the question that the committee has considered DFP's proposal for subordinate legislation under rates making and levying of different rates regulations Northern Ireland 2015 and has no objection to the policy implications of the proposed legislation at this stage. Are members content? Agreed. Thank you, and thank you, Andrew. We move on now to item number 7, which is correspondence, and I'll ask the clerk to speak to that.
Okay, Chair. There's a couple of items just to draw members' attention to. The main item maybe requiring a decision, the rest is for noting, is at page 118 of the pack. 114 and 118. There are actually 2 reports on the investment strategy for Northern Ireland. These are regular reports that the committee, all the committees receive relating to procurement aspects of the investment strategy. And members will recall that the Construction Employers Federation previously advised the committee that these reports were not serving the purpose in terms of providing businesses and contractors in particular with up-to-date information on procurement opportunities. A lot of the information seen, according to the Federation, is out of date, and they raised this with the committee. The committee then proceeded to raise the issue both with DFP and SIB and also with the individual statutory committees to raise with their departments. Arising from all of that, the Education Committee wrote to SIB and asked for some amendments to the report. So there are 2 versions of the report here now. The first version at page 114 is the new format, and the old format is at page 118. And SIB are asking the committee if they would like the new format to be adopted. Basically, the main change appears to be with the new format. You'll see on page
119.
Page 116, they're adopting a traffic light approach, which seems to be easier to follow in terms of determining whether the information is, how up to date the information is. For example, across the top it tells you there if it's a red light, it's updated more than 90 days ago. Amber between 46 and 90, and green is within the last 45 days. So the previous report was less, that was less apparent, and in fact some fields in the previous report there was no indication of how old or recent the information was. So that appears to be the main change. So it's just really to take members' views if they're content with the new format and the improvement.
Members content with the new format?
Well, Chair, it looks better anyway.
It's easier to access the information.
Chair, the committee could, if it wished, to take another view from the Construction Employers Federation in terms of this and see if get an update from them in terms of its thinking on the value of the
members.
I think that would be helpful because sometimes, it's better maybe to see how it's working in practice with those who are within the industry and get the feedback. And if it's not, at least we're in an opportunity to tweak it. But I think that this is helpful, what's coming forward. It's more up to date, as you say, and it's an indication of giving you an idea of the age of some of the information that is on it.
Okay, so members content that we contact the Employers Federation and ask for their assessment of it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you. And Shane, the other report?
Just the other items are just the invitations to events for members to note and to respond directly. Page 126, collaboration NI, community-led collaboration. There's also an invite, page 128, inspiring impact NI invitation, getting the balance right. So again, they're just for members to consider and respond to directly as okay. I think that's all the correspondence requires decisions, Chair. The rest for noting.
Okay. Members content to proceed on that basis. Item number 9. Any other business? Oh, sorry, item number 8, the committee work programme. That's at pages 130 to 135. As part of its review into the operation of the Barnett formula, the committee previously considered a list of expert witnesses to give evidence. Committee staff invite the suggested I'm seeking agreement that the committee staff can invite the suggested witnesses to provide evidence at a suitable date in the work programme. Witnesses who are unavailable will be asked to provide written statements. Are members content to proceed on that basis?
Yes, I think it's important, Deputy Chair, in light of corporation tax and some of the changes, that sooner we get look into the Barnett review, the better.
Okay.
Chair, just there's one other item I just noticed in the work programme I just wanted to take the committee's view on. Next week, actually, the committee was due to get a briefing on the validation study of welfare reform costs. Members will recall this was the consultant's report that DFP commissioned on the cost of not proceeding with welfare reform. Just wanted to check that the committee still wish to go ahead with that in light of the the Stormont House agreement, and or whether they want to get an update or how a wider briefing, or do you see any need for that briefing anymore?
I think, Chair, I would certainly like to see it. I did ask the Minister that earlier this week, but he didn't answer that particular question, just to know just exactly what's involved.
Members content to proceed with that?
Yeah, it may limit the value a bit more given sort of the fact that events that we've done, but I have no great objection to it.
Might be informative as well. Okay. Members are content. We move on then to item number 9, which is any other business. Is there any other business? Thank you. Item number 10 then, the date, time and place of the next meeting, Wednesday the 21st of January at 10 AM, room 30, Parliament Buildings. Members content? I put the question that the committee does now adjourn. Committee is now adjourned.